The story you're about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts about historical characters, events, or locations. Please sit back and listen as I narrate this story to you.
Hello, Garci.
The Hello Garci scandal was a political and electoral fraud allegation that implicated former Philippines President Gloria Arroyo, who was accused of rigging the 2004 national election in her favor. The official results of that election gave Gloria Arroyo the presidency and Noli de Castro the vice presidency respectively. During this election, hundreds of national and local positions were also up for grabs. The scandal and crisis began in June 2005 when audio recordings of a phone call conversation between President Arroyo and then Election Commissioner Hello Garci were released to the public, allegedly discussing the rigging of the 2004 national election results. A woman with Arroyo's voice can be heard whispering, "Yung dagdag," which translates to the addition in English, implying that the speaker wanted her ballot figures changed in some way. The conversations also revealed that Garciliano was vulnerable to election candidate manipulation, with one anonymous COMELEC official claiming in an interview that Garciliano was the chief electoral fraud plotter and overall supervisor working in favor of the incumbent administration. Ignacio Bonnier, who claimed that the conversations took place on June 6, 2005, released the tapes. A short time later, Sam Ong, the Philippines' former NBI deputy director, produced another round of wiretap conversations between the two senior officials. He dubbed his discoveries the mother of all tapes, prompting the country's House and Senate to launch investigations to determine the truth behind all of those rigging allegations. Uncut copies of the Ong recordings became widely available. The first recordings were made available to the press were used in the congressional investigation into the crisis. The second set of recordings, dubbed the original by the government, was more widely available in the Philippines because the government did not prohibit the media from broadcasting it. The media, on the other hand, aired both sets with a focus on the Ong recordings. According to the Ong recordings, Arroyo rigged the 2004 national election in order to keep her presidency and the political success of her allies. There were calls for President Arroyo to resign, despite the fact that she categorically denied the tapes and refused to do so. In her defense, she admitted to having brief conversations with an elections official during the campaign, but that they had nothing to do with rigging. In a television interview on June 27, Arroyo denied the allegations of election rigging, but admitted that her voice was on the tape. Arroyo called it a lapse in judgment and apologized to anyone who was offended by the leaked tapes. She went on to say that the conversations took place after the votes were counted and thus had no bearing on the outcome, though she refused to reveal the name of the COMELEC official heard in the recording. Hello Garci went into hiding as soon as the Hello Garci CDs were released, and rumors began to circulate throughout the country that he had actually sneaked out. However, after about 5 months, the pressure became too much for him to bear and he decided to resurface, admitting that he had indeed held talks with Arroyo, but only after the votes had been counted. Garciliano also testified at House hearings on the wiretapping scandal, where he confirmed that the president did not order him to defraud voters in the Philippine elections in 2004. During the 13th Congress, the scandal sparked 3 separate impeachment complaints. Attorney Oliver Lozano filed the first impeachment complaint, alleging that then-President Arroyo's admission that the voice in the Ong recording was hers was sufficient basis to impeach her for betrayal of public trust, and that her contact with a COMELEC official was punishable after the election was declared in contest. Additional affidavits alleged that her signing of the EVAT was a betrayal of public trust and that her failure to order the National Bureau of Investigation, Philippine National Police, and Armed Forces of the Philippines was evidence for impeachment. Attorney Jose Rizaldo Lopez filed a second impeachment complaint supplementing the Lozano complaint and stating that only impeachment can address the stock market, peso exchange market, President Arroyo's ratings, fuel price hikes, and playing of allegedly wiretapped conversations in the House of Representatives. Oliver Lozano also filed a third impeachment complaint as an amendment to his previous complaint. The third complaint accused her of constitutional violations and betrayal of public trust. The latter was allegedly caused by obstruction of justice, failure to publicly disclose business interests, and political dissenter killings. It also accused her of graft, bribery, and corruption in connection with projects that were unfair to the government, as well as alleged bribery of officials to certify Arroyo's victory. The House of Representatives was to vote on whether or not to remove Arroyo from office on August 23rd. However, the Justice Committee postponed a vote on the impeachment complaints in order to focus on procedures. Report 1012 was eventually sent to the rest of the House of Representatives by the committee. According to the report, impeachment proceedings should be halted entirely. Arroyo's coalition allies control both chambers of Congress and the Judiciary Committee. The following year, on January 16th, Attorney Lozano attempted to refile an impeachment motion against the president. This was met with vehement opposition in the House from Arroyo's minority party loyalists. Francis Escudero, the House Minority Leader, even threatened Lozano with a legal suit in the Integrated Bar, the official body that regulates the conduct of attorneys in the Philippines. The opposition said Lozano's attempt to depose President Arroyo was illegal and unethical, especially since the minority party in the House refused to agree to file the impeachment motion in the first place. Despite the fact that all attempts to remove Arroyo from office failed in the aftermath of the Hello Garci controversy, some members of the public did not give up and instead organized several days of peaceful protest across the country. Former Philippine President Corazon Aquino and retired Vice President Teofisto Gengona were among those who took part in the demonstrations. However, the campaigns were ineffective in changing the outcome of the Congress, in part because traditional protesting sites, such as EDSA and Mendiola, had been cordoned off by the government, and thus there weren't enough people attending the protests to cause any real concern. Protests continue, accompanied by a campaign to present evidence directly to the electorate after such evidence was barred from use in court. Nonetheless, Arroyo eventually responded to the protest by instituting reforms in her government that had nothing to do with the election fraud case. For example, she enacted new taxes to close the fiscal gap left by her administration. This contributed to the economy remaining strong and resilient throughout her tenure, but despite the healthy economy, the root cause of the Hello Garci scandal remained unresolved. During her presidency, Arroyo failed to address issues such as election fraud perpetrated by candidates during voting, untrustworthy electoral systems, and an elections commission susceptible to manipulation. As a result, the public lost faith in her leadership, with her popularity ratings dropping significantly according to polls conducted by various institutions. For example, according to a Polls Asia poll released on July 10th by the Philippine News, 57% of citizens wanted President Arroyo to leave office before the end of her full term. Another CNN/Time poll, which received 57.5% of the vote, yielded roughly the same results. The failure of both the impeachment process and the people power movement to have Arroyo face a public trial arguably brought the crisis to a close. However, the scandal continues, with the issue of electoral fraud still unresolved. This is one of the factors that prompted Arroyo to declare a state of emergency in early 2006. While the cancellation of impeachment proceedings against Arroyo provided a temporary victory for her regime, it also demonstrated that her government had the authority to use incumbency privileges to save the presidency from eradication. It will be difficult for former President Arroyo to regain public trust and demonstrate the sanctity of government in election matters until she willingly presents herself before a court of law, undergoing the full process of determining whether she was guilty of election fraud or not. Sixto Brillantes, a chairman of the Commission on Elections, declared in 2006 that those involved in the Hello Garci scandal could no longer be held accountable for the 2004 poll cheating because the 5-year prescription period for filing cases had already expired, referring to Section 267 of the Omnibus Election Code, which states that election offenses shall prescribe after 5 years from the date of their commission.
Maliwanag na may kakulangan sa wastong pagpapasya ang nangyaring pagtawag sa telepono. Pinagsisisihan ko ito ng lubos.
Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took time out of your day to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twysted Mind, and I'd like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Salamat.